So, here is my impression of Q in this episode. So, Picard, you seem to have found yourself in a conundrum with no way to find the inner light. But perhaps what you need is a preemptive strike in order to confront these night terrors, as you now find yourself wearing the face of the enemy at 0 hour as the dogs of war approach in a blink of an eye. So you must ask yourself, who mourns for morn, or who watches the watchers as you attempt to free yourself from this skin of evil? Best of both worlds. Hello, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 2, Penance. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Picard. And so I have to start with a spoiler warning for Star Trek Picard Season 2, Episode 2. If you have not seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, I quite like this episode. Maybe not quite as good as last week's because you kind of knew what was going to happen because of the trailers, and I feel like it felt to me like they were kind of dragging and on. I was like, yeah, because I guess this is the problem with trailers sometimes, and maybe those who haven't seen the trailers weren't as bothered by this because I knew the timeline was going to change, so they were in an evil totalitarian society, and Picard, they had to travel back to the 21st century in order to correct it, so it felt like this is kind of just going through the paces. I mean, not that I mind that, but it did seem like I was kind of like, get on this. Like, I really wish they would have at least traveled back by the end of the episode. It kind of annoyed me that they ended the episode and it was a silly cliffhanger. It was like, Seven of Nine's husband was beamed on board. It's like, we have you now, because we know from the trailers that they're going to the 21st century. So just get on with it. My opinion, anyway. Well, let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the Q and Picard stuff, which I absolutely loved. I talked about how much I loved Q in the previous episode, how he felt like Q, and how much I love John Delancey. And it's so great to see him back as Q, and he really does feel like Q. And it's very interesting. Like, it's very intriguing because they do have him kind of speaking in metaphor, which it's not unlike Q to do that, because Q doesn't usually, just go right out and tell Picard exactly what's going on. So you could kind of piece together maybe theories on perhaps maybe what's going on. Like, for example, I get the impression, because Picard throughout this episode is always like, what did Q do to change the timeline? We gotta stop Q, undo what Q did. Why did Q do this? But Picard, this is a recurring theme in Star Trek 2, where Picard always blamed everything on Q, and it wasn't always his fault. And I get that impression from the way Q reacts when Picard sort of yells at him. It's like, why did you do this? And Q says something that seems to suggest that's something that Picard himself did, that Q actually is not responsible for doing this. But, and then later Q mentions to Picard, oh, you know what you did, when he says this is penance, which I thought was really intense. I remember seeing this from the trailer and thinking, wow, this is intense, where he's like, this isn't a lesson, it's penance. And Picard's like, what for? He's like, you know what you did. Clearly he doesn't know what he did, and we don't know what he did, and we don't know what's going on. But it kind of reminds me of All Good Things, in the sense that Picard it's like, Q, why'd you do this bullshit? And Q's like, I didn't do it. You did it. You're gonna destroy humanity. You did it before. You're doing it right now, and you'll do it yet again. And I get that same kind of feeling here, which I love. By the way, is very consistent with Q's character. Nice callback. But I get that same feeling that Picard is being obtuse and ignoring that he is actually the cause of it. Now, to be in all fairness, in all good things, it actually was Q, because even though Picard was the one who did it, it was his time traveling in which allowed him to create the anomaly that would destroy humanity, and Q was the one who was sending him time traveling. So ultimately, it actually was Q that did it, because him sending Picard in those 3 different time periods is what caused Picard to cause the death of humanity. Now, it could be something similar to that here, that Q is involved in some sort of way. But they added in another interesting element here, which at first I didn't really know how to feel about, because at first it seemed a bit off, because Q felt like normal Q at the end of that episode, but this episode he's like pissed Q, and which is something we hadn't really seen before. And Picard even can tell, is like, Q, you seem off, there's something wrong with you. And Q just kind of ignores it and eventually even slaps Picard when he seems unwilling to participate. And of course, that line of penance, he seems really angry. So, and when Picard says, I'm too old to deal with your bullshit, he's like, old, yes. Time is uncruel, or very cruel, and lost so many wrinkles. And that had me think that this has something to do with, we don't know much about the Q continuum. We know they're immortal. They've repeated that over and over again, and omnipotent. But I feel like something's happened to age them, or to cause them to decay or something. And something that maybe Picard was responsible for, and that's why Q is so pissed off. But at the same time, again, you still get that all good things feeling where he's giving Picard a helping hand, because he says you're not alone in this. And obviously, all the main characters of the show also retain their memories of the other universe, or the correct timeline, I should say. And so that's obviously Q's doing. Also, we still don't know what the deal is with the Borg Queen and what happened with that weird Borg ship that seemed to come from a different timeline or reality. I just find it really, really hard to believe that all this is completely unrelated, and that Q just randomly decided to save Picard and his crew from death and just change the timeline to this alternate, Totalitarian thing just on a whim. In fact, if that is something the case like that, I'll be very, very disappointed. I feel like there's a missing piece of the puzzle. That's something that Picard did that caused this, because mind you, if you recall, the Borg Queen specifically asked for Picard. And now Q also is having Picard and suggesting that he did something and that this is penance for what he did. So I think there is a missing thing that we don't know yet that Picard did that actually caused all this, which will probably be revealed as we go through the season. I hope that's the case, because to me that would be very interesting. Now, we also get the scene again, as I kind of made fun of in the intro. If you didn't get that, it's because Q name drops yesterday's Enterprise, and then he name drops In the Mirror Darkly, both episode titles. In the Mirror Darkly being an episode title from Enterprise. Now, of course, he's saying the full Shakespeare quote or whatever, but come on. It's no coincidence that this just happens to be a title. And they both deal with, mirror universes, or not mirror, parallel universes or alternate realities or dark places or whatever. So it's thematically tied. And in that case, there's a lot of this totalitarian society that felt like the mirror universe. It kind of felt like Discovery's version of the mirror universe, too. Because, of course, in TNG times, they didn't have a straight-out, evil counterpart mirror universe, because they had the DS9 version where humanity was enslaved and fighting a resistance against the the Klingon Cardassians. So it wasn't like a one-to-one evil versions of our main characters the way that Mirror Mirror was. So we get to see that here, but of course it also has shades of yesterday's Enterprise because this isn't a parallel universe, this is an alternate timeline, and they need to restore the timeline. So we get that cool scene with Q in like Picard's, or General Picard's like throne room with all the skulls, and he mentions gold ducat. and then he also mentions General Martok, which I love. I love the shout outs. Gul Dukat, clearly the best villain in the entire Star Trek franchise. So I love that Q is like, oh, he's the reason why you have that synthetic body in this in this timeline. So apparently Dukat like nearly killed Picard, where Picard had to transfer himself into a synthetic body. Telling you, he's the best villain. I think that's the perfect choice to have Dukat be the one who almost killed Picard. And God, I love the DS9 callbacks. But anyway, so we get the rest of this universe. I did like the sequence of the different people sort of waking up and realizing and maintaining their memories, like 709 being the president. It's a coincidence that they all happen to be near each other, or positions where they can get near each other. And I love how, like, because Picard had the cue to explain everything to him, but these people don't, so they got no idea what's going on. And it was great to see it from like 7-9's perspective as she's slowly piecing it together. She calls Rios, but she's like very careful, and Rios is also careful until they kind of hint at it, and they're able to speak freely because they realize they are who they are. And then Raffi, we kind of see Raffi, it kind of figures out who she is off screen, because she, by the time we first see her, she already knows that this is off, and she already knows to pretend to be one of these, security guards in order to save Elnor's life. And then seeing Elnor, like, not knowing what the fuck is going on, like, running for his life. That was all cool stuff. And then we meet Jurati. Jurati, I think this is effective. I didn't really like her all that much in season 1, but I think this is effective comic relief, the way she was, like, babbling on. She was doing a terrible job at, like, trying to hide the fact that something was up, and so the 7-9's husband or whatever was, like, very much aware that she was acting weird and something was going on, and he picked up on it right away, which I'm glad he did, because he would have been a moron had he not. The way she was like, oh yes, you're seven shots, or whatever. It was a very bad cover, which I do like, because later she made up for it by coming up with a very convincing story, like when the dude walked in on Picard and the whole group, and they were sitting there chatting. It's like, oh, what's going on? And it's starting to flip out, and then she came up with a very convincing story of why they possibly would be all there together talking. And that was actually kind of cool. I was kind of impressed with that. Although, here's the thing. When they had the plan to beam out to Rio's ship, I honestly wish that they would have just beamed out and done their slingshot, rather than have this whole suspense thing where Picard has to go in front of the huge, like, mosh pit concert goers, people going wanting to kill the Borg Queen. And yeah, I don't know, actually, I mean, I would rather they cut that out and cut to the chase. The chase is cutting you. I don't know, whatever Q said in this episode, but anyway, I would rather they have cut to the chase. But that being said, this is still really suspenseful. Like, it reminded me of, like, the best Mirror Universe episodes, like Mirror Mirror, specifically Mirror Mirror and Crossover, which is the first and the best DS9 one, because DS9 ones got progressively worse as they went on, the Mirror Universe episodes anyway. But the thing about Mirror Mirror and Crossover is that is really, really sort of high tension, high stakes, where they're in stuck in this twisted, upside down, fucked up world and trying to escape. And I definitely got that same feeling here. And that definitely was specifically highlighted towards the end of the episode, where we had that high tension, high stakes, where they all could be caught and killed at any moment by living in this really fucked up society. So even though I would have rather they cut to the chase, I'd still appreciate it. It was still high stakes, high tension storytelling. But then, as I mentioned, the cliffhanger I could have done without that entirely. Like, okay, you had that high stakes, high tension moment where they had to escape, and Dorati was able to beam them out at the last minute. And by the way, I love how Eleanor was like letting those dudes beat them up, and as soon as Raffi was ready, she's like, "Okay, they're yours, Eleanor," and he just kicked their asses and killed them. I did like that. I think Eleanor gets. I heard a lot of people bitching and moaning about Eleanor, like, "Oh, he actually beheaded someone that's very on Star Trek like." Get over yourselves. Anyway, I'm sorry. I like Eleanor. I always did. So I love that scene. I love that scene where he totally kicked this guy's asses, like, as soon as Raffi gave him permission to. And the Borg Queen thing, like, alright, here's the thing. Like, so when they were saying, oh, how would we time travel? I do love how Picard mentioned the whole slingshot around the sun, because that was used several times in the original series. So it would be nonsensical. It's like, oh, I don't know how to time travel, when clearly you do by studying history. But what I didn't like is how Girardi is like, well, they had the Enterprise, Kirk had Spock to calculate that. We don't have anyone. Really? Like, you don't think 7 of 9 is capable of just as much calculating as Spock? And what about even Girardi yourself? I don't know. Like, and then 7 of 9 is like, well, we have the Borg Queen. Now that, my friend, is plot contrivance in order to involve the Borg Queen, because there's no reason 7 of 9. She would be able to handle this just fine. Like, you don't need the fucking Borg Queen, but of course they want to have some contrived excuse in order to bring the Borg Queen along. So, in order to have that high tension thing where they had to save the Borg Queen when they were trying to, all those totalitarian idiots were trying to eradicate. Eradication Day! Like, that was a bit silly. So that's a bit of plot contrivance, and I'm still not 100% on board with this Borg Queen, but she hasn't totally pissed me off, and nowhere near as bad as the Voyager version, so I'm still willing to go with it in that regard. Anyway, so my rating for Penance out of 10, I'm going to give this an 8. Extremely good. I was very close to giving it a 9. But again, there was a bit of the plot contrivance, and I did kind of wish that they, at the very least, skipped over that bit at the end and had them escape. I think, as I said, like at the start of the video, like, I know that they're, going to travel to the 21st century and that there is a totalitarian government. Now, I do know, we needed an episode to explain it, but I think they don't need to drag it out as long as they did. In my humble opinion, but, I hope they don't drag it out for too long in the next episode, too. I hope, like, pretty much at the start of the episode they travel back in time. But we'll see. We'll see. It was, as I said, I still love the Q stuff. I still thought it was a really high, high stakes, high tension, like edge of your seat kind of episode that was very effective. So at the very least, definitely gets an 8 out of 10. It's a very strong 8 out of 10, close to a 9, but I couldn't quite give it one. So anyway, that is it for my review of Penance. I shall be back next week to cover the next episode of Star Trek Picard, as well as covering Discovery's finale next week, and all other sort of Star Trek videos to come, as well as I cover other shows such as The Expanse, Star Wars, Clone Wars, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.